Hey, Kendall County, Jon Tipton and Robert Saenz here this morning. We are honored to have our two guests with us this morning, Dr. Melissa Duder and Mr. James Pardo. And our topic today is mental health. So extremely happy to have you both here to join us and to talk about mental health. Robert, what do you...
Well, happy to have Dr. Duder here. That she came by our studio today, and it's pretty busy because not only do you cover Kendall County, do you cover the whole state of Texas? And
that's correct,
right? And a lot of your patients. What makes your model unique, Dr. Duder, is that you have an urgent care model for mental health. I'd like to hear a little bit about it, and but first, tell us a little bit about yourself. What got you into the field of psychiatry, and eventually brought you down here to Texas?
I don't even know how to explain what got me into psychiatry. I went to medical school, rotated through all the specialties, surgery and internal medicine, family medicine, and I was just at home in psychiatry. It's just very clear that that was where I belonged, and so that's where I went. And went to psychiatry residency. I was chief resident here at the UT Health Science Center in San Antonio. Went straight out of residency and into private practice, and really had a focus on doing psychotherapy where I could do a deep dive with patients and urgent needs. And so I would see folks immediate need, same day, next day. I really enjoyed doing that. And then within about 3 years, my practice was full. And I was in an office where there were 5 psychiatrists there. I was one of 5, and we were all full. And we started probably around 2008 is when I was really growing frustrated because all 5 of us would be on the phone with potential patients and saying, I can't see you. It'll be 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Now I think they're typically out to about 12. And these are, many of them, they're no insurance. And so we're talking about people who have cash up front to pay for an appointment are waiting 3 months. Right. So I had this experience. This is a kind of my origin story with the urgent care model is that my office assistant was on leave and my mother-in-law was filling in the office. And she came back in my little office suite. I was eating my lunch and she was almost in tears. And she said, there's a lady on the phone and her son is hearing voices. And this started a week ago and you have to help them. And I said, well, I'm full. I'm staying late already.
That can't wait 12 weeks.
I don't have any space, right. And that can't wait. And she said, you have to help this mother. She's crying on the phone to me. And you have to do something for her. And so I made an accommodation, came in on a Saturday morning and saw that young man, who I still see, by the way. And in a situation where somebody's hearing voices, for example, the immediacy of that contact is really important, not just for the stabilization of the current episode, but for the next 30 years of that person's life. And so if you let that person remain sick, their illness gets worse over time. And they'd been to the hospital and said, you don't qualify for hospitalization, go find somebody out in the community.
Yes.
And everybody in the community was unavailable. And so that really started to put together this idea that we've got to do something else.
That you needed an urgent care service.
And what that required of me is that I expand my understanding to work with nurse practitioners and physician assistants. And I think that's been hard for psychiatry. There's a real sense of wanting to make sure that we're protective of the excellence level of the care that we provide. And so I had to transition into working with others and making sure that I supervise them extremely well so that we can get those folks in and get them stable.
Yes.
And provide care that is at that level of excellence. So.
Well, thank you for your service, Dr. Duder, because that is a very valuable service. And today in the studio we also have a singer-songwriter, a very talented individual who has been very open and shared his experiences and his battles with mental health. And Mr. James Pardo. James, I'd like to know a little bit about you. Tell us where you hail from, and if you wouldn't mind sharing your experiences, your challenges that you've had.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you, Dr. Duder. I have utilized your services before because like you were saying, it's virtually impossible, to find a place for yourself within the mental health care industry. I don't know about anywhere else, but I know here, it's hard, and for people who, suffer trauma, usually victimized and stuff like that, but like you kind of feel victimized by the system too, because it's like, even if you go to your PCP, right? And you're like, hey, can I have some recommendations? Okay, here's some recommendations of doctors that can probably help you. And you call each one of them and like, well, we're no longer taking patients, as you stated. It wasn't even like it's a 12-week wait, it's a 6-month wait. It was like, no, we're not accepting any more new patients. And
You experienced that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Initially,
like throughout the entire time, which is exactly why I utilized, your urgent care services, because I was literally on the verge of like, so yeah, so I've utilized it, but to like James Pardo, I was born and raised my formative years in Sinton, Texas, and I moved to San Antonio when I was 17, and I've been here ever since, and I'll be 49 in January. So yeah, I'm from San Antonio. Singer-songwriter, yeah, I've been accused of that more than once.
You're too humble, James. I've heard your music.
Oh, well,
wonderful
thank you.
music, wonderful songs.
Well, thank you for always being so supportive. I appreciate it. But yeah, no, I guess it all started when I was a kid, when I was around 5, life happened, I kind of went through some, not really like I guess like physical, mental, and sexual abuse. None of it was at home.
Right.
This is all outside, but yeah, when I was 5, the sexual abuse started. And that was kind of where, I guess that's where like the snowball started.
Yeah, so it's been a long time.
Oh yeah. Which is, I guess, part of the reason why I'm so open about it. I've had 43 years, to understand. And of course, having been through, attempting to go through the mental health care system, but as last year, like I checked myself into recovery center / mental health center, for 3 months, because I couldn't do it anymore.
Sure.
And I needed to be somewhere, but all that, like, that's way down the line. But yeah, growing up, I was bullied a lot. I was picked on, the abuse, along with, like generational trauma, things
Sure.
that, families don't know that they're doing, that kind of, have ill effects, mentally on children, and of course nowadays you're just kind of soft if you say that, and then if you wonder why people snap and shoot people up, sometimes they're just sick. But, what I feel like is we kind of like, nobody wants to have that uncomfortable conversation. Because it is uncomfortable.
Yes.
Like one time, speaking of being a musician, one time I asked a friend of mine, he managed bands and stuff, and I wasn't asking him to manage me. I was just like, hey, can you give me a constructive critique of my between song banter, I guess? And he's like, yeah, sure. After the show, he was like, all right, it was a great show. He's like, but when you're describing like what your song's about, like, don't really tell people what they're about. And I said, why? He's like, because like when you talk about like mental health stuff, it makes people uncomfortable. I was like, fair enough. I was like, but if hearing about my mental health struggles makes you uncomfortable, just like fathom for 1 second, like what it's like to have to live with this shit on a daily basis, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I can't escape it, and I have no medication. I have no way to learn how to deal with this. Like this is long before I learned about cognitive behavioral therapy, and, like trying to understand like irrational thoughts and do they have any validity? Like you don't know these things,
right?
So the only way I could really, because I couldn't afford to go to a doctor. So thus I turned to songwriting, so this is how I have to deal.
It's great therapy
to let it out.
Right.
It could be disturbing therapy for some, yes. But as they say, art is supposed to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comforted, so I've always kind of really, really felt a strong kinship to that particular statement. But no, it was just growing up. There was sexual abuse, and I guess that happened for probably about 5 years between two different people, both men. And especially nowadays, like with the things like societal things, and I guess like societal taboos that we consider taboos. Like
there's a lot of stigmas, you mean?
Yeah, like for instance, like it was, nowadays it's like a drag queen reading to your kid is going to molest your child. But for me, it was two straight men,
Mm.
who were kind of pillars in the community,
Right.
so like there's stigmas behind that too, like, oh, well, it couldn't have been this guy,
Right.
as, sadly, a lot of women in America know, like, that's why they don't also like report cases of rape
Mm.
because like, oh, he couldn't have possibly done that. Like, really? Like, I
And-
mean,
and-
that's like saying Hitler wasn't capable of doing what he did. Like people are as unpredictable as rattlesnakes,
Do you find that too, Dr. Duder, that the stigma is still here?
Well, and there's so much to unpack about
Yeah.
about what you said, but I just want to go back and say, if we could eliminate childhood abuse and neglect, that is the single most modifiable risk factor for long-term psychiatric illness.
Yep.
There's this, San Antonio did a big project, they're ongoing, on what's called the ACEs score. So it's a 10-point scale, adverse childhood experiences scale. And you just answer 10 questions. Was there food insecurity in your house? Was somebody being abused? Was your daddy in prison? Et cetera, et cetera. And that scale is an excellent predictor of your long-term mental health. And so when you have people who have these, stacked and particularly sexual abuse, you take a young child, they have no context to understand what's happening in that situation. And so, but also neglect, having just nobody to turn to who you can open up to as a kid, nobody around. There are just so many factors.
On top of the fear factor of being a child, like, because
Right.
I mean, I was 5, but even then, like, I knew like what was happening. This isn't right. Like this is not normal.
Who do you go to?
Yeah, this is not normal. And I feel like if I tell somebody, I'm going to get in trouble.
Right.
And I think that's kind of par for the course for like any child who goes through sexual abuse. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. Like, if I say something, am I going to get in trouble? Like this is, and again, you just like, I don't want to say you just know inherently that it's just wrong, but something's not right.
Yeah.
Even at 5, I knew like, this is kind of sus. This is kind of suspect.
And I guess I want to go on to say it's very refreshing to hear an adult man talk about his childhood sexual abuse in a public forum. There are so many men who are sexually abused as children. The statistics are high. They're higher for women. But the men do not want to stand in public and say, this happened to me. And then the result of that is that other men believe that this doesn't happen to men. And so I thank you for being so
Yes, thank you.
open. I think it helps a lot of people.
No problem. I certainly hope it does. I think that what you just said also, that's a whole nother thing to unpack too. Like, men won't say anything, and of course it'll piss somebody off, but I don't care. But like, it's always like this patriarchal society, like, well, a real man wouldn't have that happen to him or whatever. You're like, well, a real man wouldn't molest little girls either, but here we are, right? So I don't know. I guess maybe for a portion of my life, maybe I kind of felt that way, but I do know that there is a point in my life where I just stopped caring, and I don't give a shit what you think about me or what happened to me. In order for what you say to me to matter to me, I must first value your opinion. So if you have something derogatory to say about me and I don't know you, like, I don't care. Like if you think I'm going to lose sleep over this, like, you're thinking about it more than I am, because I'm not thinking about it, and I forgave, the people that did these things to me a long, long time ago. It took me a long time. I was angry for a lot of years, of course, and I think that's pretty normal, angry at the world, angry at God or whatever that's supposed to be, but again, I think those are all natural reactions and perfectly normal responses to those kind of things, especially when it happens to you at such a young age. Like, I was really angry because I didn't have a childhood. I lost my innocence at 5, so I was thinking about things at 6 that, and not only that, but I think what people don't talk about either is other effects of sexual abuse like that is sexual deviancy.
There's the deviancy, there's the alcoholism, the addiction.
Oh, absolutely.
It compounds.
Absolutely.
And it builds up until it gets to a point something's going to break.
Yeah.
And one thing I haven't shared with Robert, and I'm based on your testimony, you and I have a lot in common. And
I'm sorry.
the difference, it happened. The difference between, I think, where we're at is that I was in a secluded place. I lived in Alaska for 3 years, from 3 until I was 6 years
Oh,
old.
wow.
And nobody. It was only my stepfather, my mother, and me. So everything that you discussed, the food depravity, the all of that, took hold on me.
Yeah.
And I didn't address this until maybe 5 years ago. And to your point, all the things that we see now and we categorize as, oh, he's just an alcoholic. Oh, he's just an addict. Nobody takes into consideration everything that compounded and has been building up for years.
Absolutely.
And it finally manifests itself. And when it manifests itself in ways that destroys your family life, your professional career,
Yourself.
right? And then all that together turns you into somebody that you don't really recognize anymore and
Exactly.
you don't want to be anymore.
Amen.
And I'm so glad to hear that you're available and that you have these, the urgent care available for people like us and other folks that are going through very similar circumstances, because I don't have insurance as well.
Yeah, I don't either.
And I rely on the VA. And I'm not going to say that the VA is a horrible institution. I think that it has rooms for improvement, but mental health, it's a check the box. All they want to do when you go in, and it doesn't matter whether you have PTSD, you have a traumatic brain injury, it doesn't matter what it is. You walk in after waiting several months to get an appointment, and then they put you on medication. I am not a fan of medication.
Nor am I.
I think
I'm on
medication
Lexapro
is
and
a
lithium,
crutch.
but I don't like taking it.
I
But it
think
helps.
it's a crutch. I self-medicated for years, right? And it got me to a point where I couldn't function anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So I had to go back and revisit and do a lot of internalizing, because there isn't a lot of help. You go tell these doctors, some of them are like, okay, well, you meet this criteria, so I'm going to do this. It's like they follow a flow chart and they don't actually take the time to visit and find out what are the underlying causes that caused this
Yeah.
and brought you to this point. And then on top of that, as you mentioned, it's the people that you work with, your family. My family still doesn't really believe what happened to me.
Wow.
So I
That's sad.
completely understand where you're coming from. And again, I am so grateful that you're here to share this.
Thank you for
And-
having me.
James.
I'm
Yeah.
happy to be here.
And Robert, you asked about stigma.
Yes.
Stigma means, right, that we push this into the shadows. And so when you're talking about addiction, things that destroy your family life, this unraveling that happens, it's those secrets. If we can live in a world where a kid can come forward and say, something's wrong, I need help, and they can do that early, and they can do it when they're 5 or 10 or 13 or 17, it really modifies these risk factors. Because if I've got a dirty secret that I have to keep, that's a lot for a kid to hold. And so you do turn to acting out, you turn to, your grades drop, and then you're in trouble at school.
No, your
So-
self-esteem as well. Like,
Right,
you
and
feel
then-
worth.
and you have to make up for it somehow.
Yeah, you
And
do.
the teachers don't like you. So then you go down further, and maybe you're not going to school because that's not a good place for you anymore.
Exactly.
And then, on and on, substance use, all kinds of behavior, lower education rates, risk of just not having the same opportunities. And it builds and builds, but it starts with the stigma. It starts with not being able to tell anybody what happened.
Yeah.
Because they don't believe you, because that's not something we've done in society. And that's the turn that's got to be first with it. I see it's happening.
Mhm.
It's very heartening when I talk to young people, and they're just so open in ways that we weren't when I was a kid, with each other. They're open with their friends. They're on the phone supporting each other with their rough moments. And that's what we need in order to turn this ship around.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Dr. Duder, and James, you touched on it too. That I grew up in a generation where, and also being Hispanic,
Oh, yeah.
you compound that where you walk it off. You got to be tough,
And don't cry.
Right, don't cry, and I find my kids are still teaching me at this age. My kids are in their 30s and still teaching me about empathy and being more sensitive and being more open. And that's a challenge for me at times, when my kids tell me, you need to talk about this, you need to apologize. And I'm of the belief, the training, I should say, or no, me being kind to you after I've offended you is my way of apologizing.
But that's not accountability, though.
It's not. Very good point. And I'm still learning that, James.
Yeah,
by the
we
way.
all are. We are.
James, you said you're having a birthday coming up. You're going to be 49 or so, or
January 4th.
Tell us what you know or what you believe about all this talk about Gen Z, Gen X, Boomers. How does that impact mental health in our society?
I think it impacts a lot. I mean, for instance, like when you say like Boomers, Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z, whatever else comes after that,
right.
I don't know. I don't know where we go with the alphabet.
Right.
After that, but like growing up, you always heard from our parents, who were the boomers, they're like, well, my parents did this to me and we turned out just fine. I'm like, did you though? Like you're pretty fucked up, like you're messed up. Like, did you really turn out that fine? And the same thing with Gen X, like, well, our parents beat the shit out of us and look how great we turned out. And like, we're running the country. Like, are you sure we turned out all right? Like, I don't look at the state of affairs.
We're a pretty violent society.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, we are a very violent society, and we revel in it. Come and take it. Like Mullen Lob. Same thing. Live free or die. New Hampshire. But not that. I mean, that is a completely different context. But we have this. We revel in this violent culture of ours. Like, oh, what did you say? I'll kick your ass. Like rather than being like, sorry, you're having a bad day, bro. Take it somewhere else, which is all ego also, which is what leads you into that. But like back to Gen X, like I thought like growing up with Gen X, I felt like, okay, we're kind of like the baby boomers thought think they're so tough, right? They think they're so hard, but they're actually the most sensitive of the generations because their parents, the greatest generation, they were hard. Because they grew up in hard times. They grew up knowing what it's like to be poor and to struggle. Not all of them. Mm-hmm. Some of them came from well-to-do families, as that's just the world.
Sure.
But the greatest generation was hard. They fought for what we have now. At the end of World War II, Europe was decimated. We became the manufacturing hub of the world for the most part. So yeah, we saw unprecedented wealth come, like middle-class families grew. Mm-hmm. Baby boomer kids got things their parents never had. They got cars when they became teenagers. They sent them to college. And I find it funny that baby boomers, our parents, didn't quite understand the angst of Gen X because like they were given everything they could possibly ever want that their parents never dreamed of having when they were growing up. And then their parents sent them to college and then they got pissed off, and they're like, tune in, turn on and drop out, and the greatest generation's like, what the hell is going on here? Like I gave Trevor like his Rambler that he wanted, and he went to Kent State. Bad joke. In a bad joke, but I have sick sense of humor.
Sure.
But like they did that and then they went to college and they became kind of like really looking at what's going on in the world, like, okay, we are a great country, but our government does some really jacked up stuff and we're angry about it. So they kind of had some soul at that point, right? They get out of college, they're able to get jobs, they start making money, then they turn to Wall Street executives. Like, well, I was young and idealistic, but now it's time to make money.
And it doesn't matter anymore.
No, it doesn't
the
matter.
government's doing all that. As long as
my paycheck is coming in,
they don't care.
Yeah, and that's still that way.
But we've got to change that.
Yeah, well, that's why. And again, that's why, like, I look at my generation, and now I see like all these Gen X people sounding like our parents, and it's so disheartening. Like, you guys got soft, like Gen X. I felt like we were a pretty hard generation. We grew up in some of the most dysfunctional households.
Granted,
latchkey kids. We got home. We were the first generation where mom and dad both had to work, largely. Or there was only one parent, as in my case, you know. And my dad, God rest his soul, at the time when I was growing up, my father was sick. You know, he was an alcoholic. When he died, he was a recovering alcoholic for like 30 plus years. But when I was a child, you know, he was sick. And as a kid, I didn't know that. But as I got older, I understood. You know, he was sick. And long before he passed, we made amends, and we had a great relationship. He was a great relationship with my daughter. But, you know, either way, like, we grew up in really weird circumstances. So that's why I get upset when I see people of our generation really knocking on like Gen Z, you know, my daughter's generation, because I feel like you don't have to agree with everything that they do. But to say that these kids, and I hear it all the time from boomers, from Gen Xers, even millennials, and they're soft too. I don't know what the hell they're making fun of anyone for. But like, there's like, they're so soft. But like we were discussing in the break, how are you going to call a generation soft when like the worst thing we had to do in school was go through a fire drill? And these kids are going through active shooter drills because they know at any given moment there could be someone wander onto this campus with a gun, you know, Uvalde,
Right.
you know, Parkland, Sutherland Springs, you know, just here. I knew one of the people killed in Sutherland Springs, and then at the Santa Fe High School, Santa Fe, Texas, that shooting, I knew one of the girls that got killed in that school shooting, you know. And to see like the discourse that goes on, for instance, and here in Kendall County, you know, it's all like shall not be infringed. You know, they forget, you know, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of the state. The right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. They leave that first part out conveniently, right? Because, you know, the Gravy Seals are not a well-regulated militia. It's just a bunch of fat hill country dudes with beards and guns who think that they can fight, you know, not knowing that should that war come to your door, you're going to be dealing with people who know how to fight and who have real war skills, you know. So that's what I'm saying. Like, we call
tough talk.
Yeah, it's just tough talk. It is. It is.
Tough
Like,
talk.
I mean, like, for instance, I lived in New England, right? Maine, open carry state, like constitutional carry state. You don't need I never saw anyone carrying a gun ever. Even, I mean, you can carry it. You're able to. No one carried a gun. Here, I was like, what are you so afraid of? You know, like, I'm not afraid of anything. I have a gun. Well, clearly you're afraid of something because you're carrying a gun, you know.
And along those lines, Dr. Duder, we were talking about active shooters. You know, I see on television, like most people, the active shooter happens, then people talk and say it's mental health, but I don't hear any follow-up when mental health. Okay, do we really dissect this every case and talk about the child like you did?
Right.
Can we just write it off the mental health? But what do you find, Dr. Duder, in your experience and your research that is common amongst these active shooters?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a complicated topic. When they say mental health, I think what the public thinks is that person lived in an altered reality where they misperceived things and they maybe heard voices or had paranoia or something. And many of these shooting cases, it does not appear that that's what's the case. And I just want to back up a minute and say that people with serious mental illness are far more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators of violence. The best predictor of violence is a history of violence, either as a victim or as a perpetrator, okay? So you get in these mass violent events, you typically have young men who are marginalized in society. There's no place for them in the social group. They're being pushed out. They, in many cases, come from bad home circumstances. Someone is neglecting them. Someone has hurt them. Many of them are getting into online content that is violent in nature, encouraging people to act out. But even before online, I mean, you go all the way back to Columbine. These are marginalized young men who have no place in society, and they want to punish society, and they want to be famous for it. They want us to say their names. They want to do something epic. They want to scare everybody. And the psychology of that is not the kind of serious mental illness that we think about where you put somebody on medication, right? This is more in the range of personality problems, family dysfunction, trauma, neglect. These people are angry and pushed out. And so I think the answer is not in like the the hard ass disciplinarian punishment. The answer is on the other end of the spectrum.
They need love. They're marginalized. They need love, and they need, I guess, to know that they're relevant, right?
That's right.
They matter to someone.
Throughout these kids' childhoods,
Right.
we need to give them a place in the school. We need people to listen to them. We need interventions for these kids if they are being bullied, if they are being pushed out. And of course, yes, of course, we need school security. We don't need the back door of the school unlocked. Of course, that makes a lot of sense. But we have to love these kids, especially as they get into their teen years. This is who perpetrated some of these incidents. And make sure they know that they're part of the community, that the community embraces them, and that there's a place for them in the culture to help them with whatever they've gone through at home, and to bring them in and not push them out, so that they can be part of something and they don't need to turn to an online community or turn to violence.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Melissa Duder and James Pardo, for sharing your personal challenges and how you've overcome them, and Dr. Duder, Melissa Duder with Stigma Mental Health, urgent mental health here in San Antonio, and you provide telehealth services as well.
Yes,
I've used them.
and which is very important. And John, do you have any parting words or what you've learned today visiting with these two fantastic people?
I think that the fact that we are bringing this topic to the forefront for our viewers and our listeners to see is a step in the right direction. James, I wish you the best of luck, and
thank you.
I'm if I can say, I'm very proud that, like I said earlier, that you've stepped up and you were willing to share your story, because
Absolutely.
I know there are so many young men and women both that feel hesitation to come forth because they won't be believed, or because they don't really think that there's going to be a solution for their problem, simply because they don't know where to go. And I think what Dr. Melissa Duder is doing with respect to providing the urgent care for people that need it is absolutely
needed right away.
And needed right away. And I would encourage everybody in Kendall County, if you feel like that you have some challenges that you need to address, to please reach out to somebody. Of course, we're biased now. We would like you to reach out to Dr. Duder, but at the same time, please go and seek help and talk to somebody about it. And the last thing I would like to mention is that, to your point, when we were talking about trying to integrate and make sure that these individuals that are experiencing these challenges are welcomed into the community, it brings to mind who is responsible for doing that. Is that mom and dad? Is that a teacher? Is that somebody else in that young person's life? Because to your point, James, mom and dad are both working, and in fact, that's still quite.
I think it's all of the above.
I want to answer that.
Anyone who might notice any kind of like anomaly, I would say
there's data. One caring adult, one neighbor, one grandparent, one teacher. Right?
One mentor.
The theater teacher, the band director, right? The baseball coach. Anybody who embraces that kid and brings them in modifies their long-term risk factors.
And
So
she's right.
if you look at kids who are neglected, abused, have those high ACEs scores, it's the one caring adult. If you're divorced and you're worried about what goes on in that other household, right? It's your household, right?
Do something, right? Intervene.
And just, jump in and love those kids. Just love them where they are, embrace them, bring them in. That's really the answer.
I mean, she's right, because like that's kind of what was my experience, right? Like I always, like as a kid, when things like that happen, you already have like a low self-esteem, and so you kind of have a hard time finding your way, like meandering your way through. I mean, being a kid is tough. Being a teenager is even harder. Right. Being a young adult, a young man in America, and I know this is a topic people don't like because it's uncomfortable, but I don't care. You don't grow without being uncomfortable. So get ready to grow. Like growing up, not only as a young man, but someone who's considered a minority in a place that I'm indigenous to, but like growing up as a young man and growing up as a Hispanic, Mexican, whatever you want to call me, Latinx, I don't care, brown, growing up in a country and in an area that is typically, even though this is where we're from, has typically looked at you as a second class citizen. That adds a whole nother level, and I know nowadays people are like, oh, just get over it. You're like, no, these are deeply ingrained thought processes in our society.
Right.
Like you don't just get rid of institutional racism overnight or over a generation. It's been 400 years. Stop. But not only that, but all those things combined led me to where I went. It was the music teacher. It was the band director. It was the theater teacher, which is why I ended up gravitating toward music, because these were the people who showed me like genuine like care and affection. I'm friends with her to this day. My elementary music school teacher. We're friends on Facebook, and I've called her out numerous times, giving her credit. Becky Salier Salazar. She's wonderful woman. She was my 5th and 6th grade music teacher. But because of her, I found the confidence. And she let me know that, hey, you're really good at this. And so she's right. All it takes is one caring adult. It could be a complete stranger. It doesn't have to be family.
Thank you to Becky Salazar, because James Pardo, I know we gave Dr. Duder a plug with the Stigma urgent care, mental health urgent care, but I also want to give you a plug, James Pardo, as we close, because if you love country music, you love Americana, you love any kind of music, this young man is a great singer-songwriter, and follow him. He's all over the place out here in the Hill Country. James Pardo, look him up and go listen to his music. That's how I met him, and and you've touched a lot of lives with your music too, James. You may not know it, but you have.
You've depressed so many people with your music.
Well, you didn't depress me. You made me very happy to get to know you, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Dr. Duder, again for being here. There's so much to cover, and we'd like to have you back soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me, by the way. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Robert, for asking me, and thank you for your service, for what you do, because like I said, when I couldn't go anywhere and I couldn't see anyone, it was Stigma that
Thank you.
was able to help me get some medication and talk to someone to kind of level me out until I could get to help. So thank you for what you do.
Appreciate it, James.
And thank you for having me.
So there you have it, Kendall County. We've just discussed a very sensitive topic of mental health. And for those of you that don't know where to go and don't know how to address the challenges that you or somebody else are going through, we'd like to leave you with one final thought. And that is, if you see somebody that you think needs some help, don't be afraid to reach out to that person and let them know that you care and that you love them. Let's not let these people go without the treatment and the help that they deserve.
Gracias, John.
Thank you, Kendall County. And until next time, this is the Texas Examiner.
Hola and welcome back to the Texas Examiner, Kendall County edition. I'm Robert Saenz, and as always, I'm joined by my good buddy, Jon Tipton. How's it going, John?
Howdy, Robert. It's always a pleasure to be here. We've got a special message today, folks. We're reaching out to you, our incredible viewers and listeners, to make this show even better.
That's right, John. Our podcast is all about Kendall County, and we want to ensure we cover the stories and topics that matter most to you. So whether you're a longtime fan or just tuning in for the first time, we want to hear from you.
Absolutely, Robert. We've made it super easy for y'all to get in touch with us. You can reach out to us through our social media channels, and you can always send us an email.
You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Texas Examiner and give us a follow, subscribe, and a like. We're always posting updates, behind-the-scenes content, and more, so don't miss out.
And for those of you who prefer the old-fashioned way, you can shoot us an email at thetexasexaminer@gmail.com. Whether it's a story idea, a local event we should cover, or just some general feedback, we'd love to hear from you.
That's right, John. We're especially interested in stories about the people, places, and events in Kendall County that you find intriguing or important. Maybe there's a local hero, a hidden gem of a business, or an upcoming community event that's worth talking about.
And don't forget, we love to hear your personal stories too. Maybe you have a unique experience in Kendall County that you'd like to share. We're all ears.
That's it, folks. We're making the Texas Examiner Kendall County edition your go-to source for everything Kendall County. And we need your help to do it. So please reach out to us on social media or through email, and let's keep the conversation going.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. And remember, we're just a message away. We can't wait to hear from you.
Until next time, this is Robert and John signing off from the Texas Examiner, Kendall County edition.